The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 971. Screech! Jenny Leo hit the brakes hard, jumping out of the car without even turning off the engine. Johnson Barr, seeing Jenny, quickly approached her with a smile, calling out, "Jenny!" Jenny was momentarily confused. "Who are you?" Covered in blood and looking like a mess, Johnson, with his voice altered, looked more like a demon than a person, making Jenny not recognize him. Feeling awkward, Johnson quickly said, "It's me, Johnson Barr." Already angry, Jenny's annoyance grew. "Why do you look so miserable?" Johnson, feeling humiliated, suppressed his anger and replied, "A man named young Master York took your car. I confronted him to find out what happened, and he beat me up." Jenny ignored the title, Young Master York. All she heard was that Kiran had taken her car. The thought of Kiran, combined with her fury over Lilian's beauty and Kiran's disdain for her, ignited a burning rage within her. She felt as if her pride had been utterly shattered. "Where are they?" "The 9th floor banquet hall." Johnson quickly responded. Click-clack, click-clack. Jenny marched into the Bradley Leo Hotel, high heels echoing on the floor, and took the elevator straight to the 9th floor. She was determined to find Kiran and teach him a lesson, believing that being in her family's territory gave her an advantage over Kiran's pressure points. Jenny's confidence grew as she imagined the various ways she could humiliate Kiran. She resolved to whip him with a leather strap. Meanwhile, Kiran and Lilian were escorted by Marcus Leo and Curtis Barr to the banquet hall. Curtis led them to the main seat and said, "Young Master York, Mistress Lilian, Master Leo, please sit." "Young Master York, please take the main seat," Marcus Leo said respectfully. Kiran intended for Lilian to take the seat, but she had already positioned herself to the right of the main seat, leaving it open and giving the left side seat of honor to Marcus. Kiran nodded slightly and sat down. He remained silent, though he had a good impression of Marcus Leo, respecting him as one of the few passionate members of Imperial Dragon. The tragic fate of his family was still on his mind, and he needed answers. Seeing Kiran's silence, Marcus and the others felt a bit awkward but took their seats, each trying to gauge Kiran's thoughts. Just then, the urgent clatter of high heels echoed from the entrance, and a fiery figure burst in. Kiran, seated at the main table, was directly facing the door. Jenny's eyes met Kiran's. Seeing Kiran in the main seat and her grandfather seated beside him, Jenny's rage flared. She cursed, "Bastard!" Charging at Kiran, Jenny's anger was palpable. Lilian remained calm, sipping tea serenely, ignoring the commotion. Marcus Leo and the others, curious, watched as Jenny stormed in. Just as Bradley was about to ask what was happening, Jenny reached the table, pointed angrily at Kiran, and yelled, "You bastard! Get up, I'm going to kill you." Marcus and Bradley were stunned, and the guests and hotel staff were equally shocked. This Bradley Leo Hotel belongs to the Leo family, and it is named after Bradley, so everyone recognized Jenny, the Leo family's princess. Her outburst was shocking, especially directed at someone whom Marcus Leo was bowing to. "Jenny, what are you doing?" Bradley, worried about Kiran's reaction, scolded. "Dad, this bastard almost killed me." If she weren't embarrassed, Jenny would have accused Kiran of inappropriate behavior in the car, blaming him for nearly causing a crash. "Jenny, you've misunderstood," Kiran said calmly. "Jenny?" Jenny was taken aback, and then her eyes flared with rage. "You dare call me Jenny?" Searching for something to hit Kiran with, she was incensed by his casual use of her name, reserved only for elders. Even Johnson Barr wouldn't dare call her that without consequences. "Stop this nonsense," Marcus, seeing Jenny's growing anger, said sternly. "Grandpa, this scumbag bullied me. If I don't take revenge, I can't show my face." Jenny shouted, both indignant and furious. Hearing the word bullied, Marcus raised an eyebrow, then smiled. "Is there some misunderstanding between you young people?" Looking at Kiran, Marcus added, "Young Master York, my granddaughter has been spoiled and has quite a temper. If she upsets you, feel free to discipline her." "What?" Jenny's anger reached a boiling point. Was her status so low in her grandfather's eyes? "Stop this, Jenny." "Apologize to young Master York," Bradley said. "What? Have you been deceived? This bastard is no young Master York. He's just a thug who drives around picking up girls and took my car. I want to kill him." Jenny, utterly enraged, charged at Kiran again. Kiran, surprised by her persistence, replied, "Jenny, it was a misunderstanding. I was on the phone and nearly hit your car." "Grandpa, did you hear that?" "He admitted it," Jenny, emboldened, exclaimed. "But you nearly caused an accident by retaliating, damaging my car." "That's your responsibility," Kiran countered, trying to prevent further misunderstanding. "If you hadn't done wrong first, I wouldn't have been angry." "It's all your fault. You must apologize and let me beat you up today," Jenny shouted, getting increasingly agitated. She raised her hand to slap Kiran. Marcus and Bradley's faces changed instantly. Bradley stood up, grabbing Jenny's arm. "Don't be disrespectful to young Master York." "Young Master York, my foot. He's just a scumbag picking up girls on the highway," Jenny retorted, glaring at Lilian. Lilian's expression darkened, and Bradley shivered. "Kneel and apologize," Marcus shouted angrily, standing up and glaring at Jenny. Chapter: Kneel and apologize. Jenny Leo was stunned. Everyone at the scene was stunned. Even Kiran and Lilian were stunned. No one expected Marcus Leo to make such a demand. Jenny was a woman, a beautiful and elegant woman. "Grandpa, you. Jenny bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes, and her body trembled with rage like a willow in the wind. "Kneel and apologize. Didn't you hear me?" Marcus demanded again, his voice filled with anger. "I'd rather die than kneel and apologize," Jenny retorted furiously, breaking free from her father's grip and running off. Thud. She ran straight into a man. Crash! The tray in the man's hands fell to the ground, spilling a red liquid that sizzled as it hit the floor. "Poison!" Kiran shouted. Everyone stood up, staring at the man. Marcus's face darkened as he glared at the man. "Who are you and why are you poisoning us?" The man didn't respond and turned to leave. As the Dragon Gate members moved to stop him, the man casually waved his hand, sending them flying like broken kites. They hit the ground, laughing maniacally, their bodies quickly withering like flowers drained of all moisture. "Horace Moor!" Kiran roared, leaping towards the man. "Marcus, your granddaughter ruined our plan." The man tore off his mask, revealing his true face. "Horace Moor!" Marcus and the others exclaimed in shock. "Kiran, you got lucky," Horace said, turning to Marcus. "Our cooperation continues." "What cooperation?" Marcus demanded, curious. "Killing Kiran! Ha-ha!" Horace laughed, then launched a massive attack towards Kiran with a wave of his hands. Kiran took a deep breath, raising his hands to meet the attack. The air was filled with the sound of explosive impacts, and both men staggered back a few steps. Kiran was shocked at how powerful Horace had become. "Horace, what nonsense are you talking about? When did I ever cooperate with you?" Marcus shouted angrily, realizing Horace was trying to sow discord. "Ha-ha!" Horace laughed, looking at Kiran. "Kiran will finish this next time." He turned to Marcus. "Don't forget our agreement." With that, Horace quickly left the hall, disappearing from sight. The banquet hall fell silent, with everyone staring at Marcus and the others. Marcus's face was full of anger, feeling deeply wronged. "We're leaving," Lilian said, standing up to leave. Kiran glanced at Marcus, saying nothing. Marcus, anxious, called out, "Kiran, Lilian, this is a conspiracy." Horace. However, Lilian and Kiran had already left. Outside, Jenny saw Kiran and seized the opportunity, rushing at him with a slap. "I'm going to kill you, you bastard!" Smack! Kiran caught Jenny's hand, gently pushing her aside. "Don't bother me. You." Jenny's body trembled with rage, her chest heaving. She was furious that Kiran had dismissed her so easily. "Marcus, prepare your Dragon Gate," Kiran said coldly before leaving with Lilian. Marcus and his family felt a wave of despair and anger. Why was Horace here, and why was he trying to frame them? As Kiran and Lilian drove away in the car Jenny had repaired, Lilian asked, "What do you think?" "It seems there's a traitor within Dragon Gate," Kiran replied. "Yes," Lilian agreed. "Marcus seemed genuinely distressed and was sincerely trying to explain himself and show you respect." Kiran nodded. "By putting pressure on them, we might force out the traitor within Dragon Gate." "You're suspecting Curtis Barr, aren't you?" Lilian asked. "Yes," Kiran replied. "He's too deceitful, so I suspect his real aim was to attack Marcus during the banquet." Lilian's eyes sparkled with approval. "Very good, you're maturing." Kiran felt a bit awkward but said nothing. "How was he not mature already?" "Dragon Gate is probably Horace's next target," Lilian continued. "Horace can absorb others' powers. He's likely targeting Dragon Gate's masters. I suspect Dragon Gate's masters will start experiencing misfortunes, which will be blamed on us," Kiran said. "Exactly." Lilian's eyes shone with joy. "Any ideas for a solution? You've already thought of it." "Why ask me?" Kiran joked. "I'm giving you a chance to play hero and win the girl. Don't you want that?" Lilian teased. Kiran scratched his nose. "I can't even be with my own wife properly. What more do you want?" "I see Snow Xander often helps you come up with ideas." "Isn't that enough?" Lilian said, blushing. Kiran understood her meaning. Thinking of Snow Xander's frequent dry heaves and the way she constantly rubbed her hands, he felt a sense of helplessness. Suddenly, they heard a car engine roaring behind them. Lilian glanced at Kiran. "Speak of the devil. Is she trying to kill us both?" Kiran asked, glancing at Jenny's car speeding towards them. Chapter 973. Then just go die with her, Lilian Jans teased with a cheerful tone. Kiran York shook his head vigorously. No way. Neither Yvonne Quinn nor I can die, so your life or death doesn't matter, Lilian replied with a smile. What if my wife Snow dies with me? She's carrying my child, Kiran joked deliberately. Lilian felt a bit annoyed and thought to herself, this guy is always thinking about Snowzander. Sensing Lilian's slight irritation, Kiran felt pleased. He glanced back to see Jenny Leo's car getting closer. He suddenly accelerated, his car shooting forward like an arrow, disappearing in an instant. Jenny had been ready to crash into Kiran's car, determined to die with him. At Bradley Leo Hotel, Kiran had been so arrogant that it had completely disgraced her and the Leo family. She was resolved to use her life to take Kiran's, to regain her dignity at all costs. However, just as she was about to crash, she missed. Furious, she muttered, "Damn it, I'll kill you." Her anger grew as she floored the gas pedal, chasing after Kiran's car like a madwoman. Kiran's car drove smoothly ahead, occasionally turning but never slowing down. This infuriated Jenny even more. Every time she almost caught up, it felt like he was mocking her. Jenny's rage intensified as she increased her speed. Kiran's car soon left Dragon's Mount city limits and headed to the suburbs, with Jenny close behind. Kiran pulled over on an empty roadside, and both he and Lilian got out of the car. Jenny arrived shortly after. Seeing Kiran and Lilian standing on either side of the car, she steered towards Kiran, still intent on hitting him. "She's crazy," Kiran remarked to Lilian. "Watch your life," Lilian joked. Kiran leaped into the air just as Jenny's car was about to hit him. Missing her target, she tried to brake, but the car was moving too fast and headed straight for a tree. Jenny's face turned pale with fear, completely at a loss. At that moment, Kiran landed in the passenger seat, reached over, grabbed the steering wheel, and pressed down on Jenny's slender legs, wildly steering the car away from the tree at the last second. The car swerved and avoided the collision, though the passenger side was damaged. Kiran's position over Jenny's legs had ensured his safety. Jenny finally reacted and screamed loudly. "Let off the gas and hit the brakes," Kiran shouted, pulling the handbrake. Jenny complied, and the car stopped. Kiran breathed a sigh of relief, thinking, that was close. Jenny suddenly leaned over and hugged Kiran, crying like a lover reunited after a disaster, filled with tension and relief. Kiran was in an awkward position, his face pressed against her silky legs, feeling the friction. He struggled to break free and grumbled, "Trying to kill me?" Jenny snapped out of it, quickly straightening up and regaining her haughty demeanor. "You jerk! You bullied me. What? If I hadn't saved you, you'd be dead by now," Kiran scolded. Jenny seemed scared by Kiran's stern tone and forgot to argue back. Kiran got out of the car without another word. Jenny followed suit, looking at her wrecked car in dismay. She ran her fingers through her hair and said helplessly, "Kiran, you're a jinx." "I'm a jinx, huh?" Kiran approached her. "I'll hit your pressure points and leave you here for the beasts." "No!" Jenny's face turned white with fear as she ran to Lilian, clinging to her arm. "Save me!" "Are you scared now?" Kiran asked, staring at her. Jenny nodded repeatedly like a frightened bird, her face full of tension and unease. "Get in the car." "I'll protect you," Lilian said. Jenny let out a sigh of relief. Kiran was pleased. He just wanted to scare her. Kiran glared at Jenny and said, "If it weren't for Sis, you'd be in trouble." With Lilian's protection, Jenny regained her arrogance and snorted at Kiran. Kiran started the car. "Where to?" "Take me home," Jenny instinctively replied. "We're going to Dragon's Mount," Lilian said. "Why?" Jenny asked instinctively. Kiran began driving towards Dragon's Mount. Although Lilian didn't explain, Kiran guessed it was where the dragon vein was located. Jenny's expression kept changing as she looked at Lilian. "Do you have any plans? When we get to the mountain, I'll kill you," Kiran joked, trying to scare her. "Are you going to Dragon's Mount for something?" Jenny ignored Kiran's scare tactic and asked Lilian seriously. "Just sit back and relax," Lilian replied. "If you have any ulterior motives, I'll fight you to the death," Jenny said fiercely. Kiran and Lilian were both surprised by her determination. "You can't even beat us. How will you fight to the death?" Kiran mocked. "You'll see," Jenny said, her eyes blazing with determination. Kiran smiled and shook his head, not believing her, but Lilian noticed Jenny's clenched fists and steely gaze, sensing there might be more to her than met the eye. Meanwhile, at Curtis Barr's house, Horace Moor and Curtis Barr sat together. Chapter 974. "Today is truly unfortunate," Curtis Barr said to Horace Moor, his tone filled with regret. "Yes, if we could have gotten Marcus Leo and the others drunk and poisoned, I could have absorbed their power. You could become the boss, and with the dragon vein power of Dragon's Mount, We would be unstoppable, like tigers with wings, Horace replied with equal disappointment. Curtis's eyebrows twitched with anticipation and reluctance, even a hint of expectation in his eyes. We'll have to start from scratch on this, Horace glanced at Curtis and said. I need to keep a low profile now. I can't let Marcus Leo notice anything unusual and become suspicious, Curtis said cautiously. Agreed, Horace replied. He stood up, paced the room, and then asked, Among the experts in Dragongate, who has the highest martial arts skills and disagrees with you? Are you planning to help me take care of them? Curtis's face lit up with anticipation and excitement. Horace nodded, a cold smile appearing on his lips. Of course, since we are partners, I'll help you eliminate these people. That's great! The left protector and the other two deputy bosses don't agree with me, Curtis said with joy in his eyes. Let's start with the left protector, Luke Zax, Horace suggested, knowing the Dragongate members very well. Curtis nodded happily. Marcus Leo usually assigns Luke Zax to guard Dragon's Mount, so he's often not in Dragon City. Even better. I'll visit Dragon's Mount then, Horace said calmly, as if killing Luke was as easy as reaching into his pocket. Thank you, boss, Curtis said gratefully as he stood up. See you later, Horace said, turning and leaving. Curtis clenched his fists, his eyes shining brightly. He hoped Horace would kill Luke and start the power struggle within Dragongate. He had long desired the position of boss and was eager to assume it soon. In the past, he had only dreamed of it without opportunity, as his martial arts and abilities were not outstanding. Horace's sudden offer to help him seize the boss position, despite knowing there were no free lunches in the world, was still accepted. Horace left for Dragon's Mount. Unlike Kiran York, who needed to drive around to get there, Horace traveled in a straight line through the air, arriving in less than 20 minutes. Upon arrival, he used his senses to quickly locate Luke Zax and his men, a smirk forming on his lips as he swiftly approached. Luke was meditating, while his men were either resting or patrolling in shifts. He suddenly sensed a strong presence approaching, opened his eyes, and shouted, Who goes there? Kiran York! Horace falsely claimed. As he spoke, he raised his hand, and several of Luke's men, curious and unprepared, felt their strength drain like a punctured balloon, collapsing to the ground and dying silently. Run! Go inform the boss, Luke shouted, realizing he was no match for the intruder. He leaped towards Horace to buy time for his men. As they faced off, Luke saw it was Horace, not Kiran, and hesitated, about to speak. Horace seized the moment, grabbing Luke's neck. Luke couldn't speak. His eyes widened, and his pupils dilated. Horace coldly smiled and snapped Luke's neck with a forceful twist. Luke's body went limp and lifeless. Horace opened his hand, absorbing Luke's strength before discarding him disdainfully. He then turned to chase the fleeing men, killing and absorbing the power of those he caught. Only one man survived by playing dead, while another escaped to report back to Dragongate, after searching and finding no more survivors. Horace hesitated briefly before deciding not to look for the dragon vein and left the area. Just as Horace left, Kiran, Lilian, and Jenny arrived. Kiran and Lilian got out of the car, immediately smelling the blood in the air. Someone has been killed here, Kiran said. Could it be Uncle Luke? Jenny's face turned pale with worry. Lilian said nothing and walked into the woods. The three soon reached the site where Luke and his men had been killed. Seeing Luke's tragic state, Jenny felt a stabbing pain in her heart and rushed to hug him, crying out, Uncle Luke! Kiran and Lilian saw that Luke's strength had been absorbed. They exchanged glances, both thinking of Horace. Just as they had suspected, Dragongate's experts were being targeted. Miss. At that moment, the man who had played dead stumbled out, trembling. Jenny saw him and asked, What happened here? Kiran York came and started killing everyone. He killed Protector Luke, the survivor said, filled with grief and anger. Kiran York? Jenny asked in shock. Yes, it was Kiran York. He announced his name before attacking, the survivor continued. Jenny frowned, sensing a conspiracy, especially since Kiran had been with her. She knew he was being framed and looked at him, seeking confirmation. When were these people killed? Kiran asked. The survivor, unaware that this was the real Kiran, thought for a moment and replied, About 10 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago? Kiran laughed mockingly. Yes, 10 minutes ago. Protector Luke tried to resist and told us to escape and report, but Kiran was too powerful. He snapped Luke's neck and killed him. In desperation, we played dead to survive, the survivor explained. Kiran smirked inwardly, thinking Horace was cunning, trying to provoke a conflict between him and Dragongate. He glanced at Jenny without speaking. Jenny pulled out her phone and called her grandfather, Marcus Leo. The call connected amid chaotic noise. What is it? Marcus's cold voice asked. Grandpa, Uncle Luke has been killed, Jenny said tearfully. I've received the news. I didn't expect Kiran York to be so ruthless, killing indiscriminately, Marcus growled. Jenny, anxious to explain, began, Grandpa, Kiran. Kiran covered her mouth, preventing her from speaking further, and then hung up the phone. Jenny glared at Kiran, her eyes filled with fury, feeling that her attempt to help clear his name was rejected, like a kind gesture being bitten by a dog. Kiran smiled calmly, taking Jenny's hand. Let's go. Jigo, Jenny exclaimed, trying to pull away. Kiran held her hand firmly and led her away from Dragon's Mount. In the car, Jenny asked angrily, Why leave if you're not the killer? Because I'm not the killer, we must leave, Kiran said, starting the car and heading back to the city. Jenny was utterly baffled by Kiran. Kiran turned to Lilian. Where is Johnson Barr? Lilian raised an eyebrow, smiled faintly, and pulled out her phone to inquire. Chapter 975. Half an hour later, Kiran York, Lilian Giannis, and Jenny Leo arrived at the Nightfall Bar. This was where Lilian had learned that Johnson Barr was. Kiran looked at Jenny and said, You go and seduce Johnson Barr. Jenny's eyebrows knitted together as she looked at Kiran. Me? Seduce him? Kiran nodded. Yes. He pointed at Lilian and said, With Sister Lilian being so beautiful, even a toad knows it can't get her, but you're different. You. Jenny was furious. Was Kiran saying she was ugly compared to Lilian? How could he insult her like that in public? However, looking at Lilian, Jenny could only feel that while she was a goddess, Lilian was a fairy. How could a goddess compare to a fairy? Jenny was filled with resentment, wondering how such a beautiful woman as Lilian could exist. Go on! Johnson Barr is an important piece. Kiran is just teasing you, Lilian comforted Jenny. Jenny waved her fists at Kiran. If you're a man, don't threaten me with pressure points. Someday, let's have a one-on-one fight. Hearing Jenny's challenge, Kiran couldn't help but laugh. He waved his hand and said, Don't embarrass yourself. Just go. Jenny snorted coldly and walked into the bar with determination, feeling she could defeat Kiran. Kiran and Lilian paid no attention to Jenny's thoughts and found a quiet spot to sit and drink, not bothering to follow her. Although Kiran wanted to find Horace Moor, he thought dealing with Curtis Barr was more important. This traitor needed to be eliminated, as leaving him unchecked would have endless consequences. Since Curtis was the deputy boss of Dragongate, Kiran needed evidence to take him down. Killing him outright would damage Marcus Leo's authority. Kiran had made this decision because Marcus had shown respect and gratitude today, giving Kiran a chance. Otherwise, Kiran wouldn't have given him any face. Lilian sensed Kiran's thoughts and was pleased. Kiran's increasing closeness with Imperial Dragon reduced their conflicts, which was exactly what she had hoped for. The two sat quietly, drinking, waiting for Jenny to find Johnson Barr. They didn't notice a bar girl watching them. Seeing Lilian's beauty made the girl very happy. She finally stood up and walked to a private room on the second floor. At room 222, she knocked on the door. Come in, Johnson Barr called from inside. With a creak, the door opened and the girl entered, greeting, Hello, Mr. Barr. Lacey, are you here to bring me another beauty? Johnson, despite his bruised face, leered openly. Ignoring the envious glares from the women around him, he continued, You always bring me the best. Mr. Barr, you're so clever. I just found a fairy-like beauty perfect for you, Lacey said sweetly, snuggling up to him seductively. Johnson hugged Lacey tightly, his eyes gleaming. I trust your judgment. Let's go see this beauty. Right this way, Mr. Barr. Lacey led the way, with Johnson admiring her swaying hips, giving her a playful slap. Ouch, Lacey squealed, twisting her body enticingly. If that fairy isn't beautiful, I'll have to sleep with you tonight, Johnson said lecherously. You won't have the chance, Mr. Barr. This fairy is so beautiful that even I am jealous, Lacey replied enviously. Johnson, now even more excited, eagerly followed her downstairs. As they reached the first floor, Johnson came face to face with Jenny Leo. Jenny had been searching for Johnson and had checked the entire hall, intending to go upstairs when she ran into him. Seeing Jenny, Johnson felt a wave of nervousness. He had been pursuing Jenny, hoping she would marry him, but she had never given him a definitive answer. Now, caught heading to meet another woman, he felt uneasy. Praying silently that the fairy Lacey mentioned wasn't Jenny, he said, Lacey, where's that fairy you mentioned? Lacey, oblivious to Johnson's anxiety, said, Mr. Barr, the fairy is in the east side of the bar, let's go. Hearing this, Johnson's mind went blank. He looked at Jenny and forced a smile. Jenny, all you know is how to chase women, Jenny said disdainfully. Johnson blushed, quickly laughing awkwardly. Jenny, don't misunderstand. I heard you were here, so I came down. Really? You're here for me? Jenny asked with a smile, recalling Kiran's task. Of course! Jenny sneered inwardly at his hypocrisy, but kept her composure. Great. Let's have a drink over here. I have a private room upstairs. Why not go there? Johnson suggested, hoping for a private moment with her. Didn't you hear me? Jenny asked, pretending to be displeased. No, no. Johnson shook his head quickly. Jenny turned and walked away. Johnson, with no choice, signaled Lacey not to speak and follow Jenny. Lacey felt disappointed, missing her chance to impress Johnson and earn some money, but her mood quickly changed to excitement as she saw Jenny walking towards Kiran and Lilian. Lacey followed them. Johnson, following Jenny to Kiran and Lilian's table, was shocked and uneasy at the sight of them. Mr. Barr, this is the fairy I mentioned. Isn't she beautiful? Lacey exclaimed, pointing at Lilian with excitement. Johnson, chapter. Is she beautiful? Beautiful? Is she a fairy? She really looks like one. Do you dare to go for her? Even if Johnson Barr had another life, he wouldn't dare. His face was full of nervousness and confusion, unsure of what to say. Lacey, however, didn't understand and thought that Lilian Yanes was so beautiful that Johnson was stunned. Feeling even happier, she believed she had found a gorgeous woman for Johnson and said excitedly, Mr. Barr, do you like her? When Johnson heard Lacey still talking, his anger surged. Was she trying to get him killed? Thinking of death, fear spread through him as he turned to look at Lacey. Lacey, expecting praise and a reward, quickly smiled and said, Mr. Barr, this woman is countless times more beautiful than Jenny Leo. Smack. Unable to control his anxiety, Johnson slapped Lacey. Shut up. Ah? Lacey screamed in pain, staring at Johnson in disbelief but unwilling to give up. She continued, Mr. Barr, this woman is truly beautiful, much more than Jenny Leo. She then looked around at the people watching and asked, Don't you all agree she's beautiful? Beautiful, my foot! Thud. Johnson cursed and kicked Lacey, sending her sprawling on the floor. Ouch! Lacey cried out in pain, clutching her stomach, her face twisted in agony as she lay on the ground, wailing. Johnson ignored Lacey's plight and, with a smile, approached Kiran York and Lilian Yanes, respectfully saying, Hello, young Master York and sect leader Yanes. Kiran nodded slightly. Johnson, I'm here to drink. How about you treat us? Seeing that Kiran wasn't angry and only asked him to treat him, Johnson felt relieved and quickly said, No problem. No problem. Jenny Leo frowned slightly and glanced at Kiran, thinking, What does this guy mean? Does he not even have money for drinks? If he doesn't, I can treat. Kiran continued, Thank you for your generosity, young Master Barr. It's my pleasure to treat young Master York, Johnson said respectfully. Kiran glanced at the crowd. Since there are so many people watching, why not treat everyone tonight? Treat everyone? Johnson felt as if his heart had been slashed. The pain was intense. The onlookers, seeing the fairy-like Lilian and the goddess-like Jenny, were thrilled. Even if they couldn't get close, just seeing them was a delight. So, hearing Kiran's suggestion, they clapped and cheered. Thank you, young Master York. Kiran smiled at the bitter-looking Johnson and said, See? Sure, sure. Johnson could only agree with a mournful expression. He couldn't afford to offend someone whom even the leader of Dragongate bowed to. Everyone drink up tonight. Young Master Barr is treating. Thank him, Kiran said to the crowd. Jenny led the cheer. Thank you, young Master York. She didn't finish her sentence, but the crowd shouted in unison. Johnson, thinking the crowd would thank him, had prepared a gracious expression, ready to tell them it wasn't necessary. However, hearing them thank Kiran instead, he felt like a bucket of cold water had been dumped on him, filled with embarrassment and frustration. Yet he dared not act out and could only force a smile. These people are humorous. Kiran shook his head, feigning helplessness. They should thank young Master York, Johnson quickly said. Kiran waved his hand. You go ahead, we'll enjoy our drinks. Johnson wanted to stay, but seeing Kiran ignoring him, he could only nod. Okay, young Master York. Enjoy your drinks. Call me if you need anything. Kiran nodded. Johnson left. Jenny sat down, looked at Kiran, and pouted. You had Johnson treat just to waste his money? He doesn't care about spending money on a treat. Kiran smiled, said nothing, and stood up, walking towards Lacey, who was still lying on the ground, struggling to get up. Seeing Kiran approach, Lacey thought he was coming to trouble her. She turned pale and twisted her body, trying to move away, but couldn't. Kiran bent down and pressed 2 points on her body. Ah, Lacey cried out, feeling a comfortable relief as if her body had returned to normal. She quickly covered her mouth because the sound was too suggestive, easily leading to misunderstandings. She got up, looked at Kiran, and respectfully thanked him. Thank you, young Master York, for saving me. You're fine now, go ahead, Kiran said, then looked around the bar and told Lacey, Tonight, Johnson Barr is treating. Have fun, everyone. Kiran's words carried a deeper meaning as he glanced at the footprints on Lacey's body. Lacey felt as if a bucket of oil had been poured over her head, her anger flaring. She had found a woman for Johnson, and he had beaten her. What a beast! The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She turned and started calling people, spreading the word that there was a fairy-like beauty and free drinks courtesy of Johnson Barr at the bar. Many people, eager to see Lilian's beauty, flocked to the bar like flies to honey. The bar filled up, drinks were consumed rapidly. The bar owner was urgently ordering more drinks but was thrilled to see money rolling in like snowflakes. The bar was buzzing with excitement. The bar owner was happy. Kiran smiled. Only Johnson, sitting in a private room, was about to cry. Hearing the news, he felt miserable beyond words, wishing he could just die. Kiran was out to ruin him. Jenny felt a strange and complex emotion towards Kiran, finding him mysterious and wanting to know more about him. She hadn't realized that her heart was already leaning towards Kiran. Meanwhile, at Dragon's Mount, Marcus Leo and others had examined Luke Zach's body, seeing his severed head and drained strength, a tragic death. Marcus's face was stern and cold as he looked at Bradley Leo. "Where is Kiran York?" "I heard he's with Jenny at the Nightfall Bar," Bradley responded. Hearing about Luke's death, Bradley had been keeping tabs on Kiran, so he answered promptly. "Let's go to Nightfall Bar and find Kiran," Marcus ordered, leading the Dragon Gate members there. Curtis Barr, who had been nearby, heard the Dragon Gate members accusing Kiran of killing Luke without suspecting Horace Moor, felt delighted and silently praised Horace's cunning. He followed them to the Nightfall Bar, anticipating a confrontation between Marcus Leo and Kiran. Chapter 977, Nightfall Bar. The bar tab was quickly increasing, reaching 30 million in no time. Johnson Barr was in a private room, not drinking anymore, feeling as though his blood was being drained. He kept sending his subordinates out to check on the consumption. In less than 2 minutes, another subordinate returned, crying, "Mr. Barr, it's already over 50 million. What? Seeing that 20 million was spent in just 2 minutes, Johnson panicked. If this continued, he'd go bankrupt. He hurried downstairs, unable to afford it anymore. Downstairs, he saw the crowd drinking enthusiastically. Many bottles of wine, each worth millions which he himself wouldn't dare to drink, were being gulped down like water. His heart felt like it was being stabbed with knives, driving him mad. He saw Kiran York and the others calmly drinking, without anyone disturbing them. This sight further convinced him that Kiran was toying with him. Johnson hurried to Kiran's table. Kiran saw Johnson's nervous and anxious look and curiously asked, "Johnson, what's wrong?" "Mr. York, please, can you stop the treat?" Johnson was almost in tears, pleading with Kiran. Jenny Leo raised an eyebrow and said unhappily to Johnson, "Johnson, are you really feeling the pinch for spending a bit on drinks?" Johnson thought to himself, "A bit? That's tens of millions." Previously, he would have pretended to be generous to win favor with Jenny, but now he couldn't afford such foolishness. He could only say bitterly, "It's already over 50 million. If this continues, I don't know how much it will be. Please, Mr. York." Seeing Johnson's miserable look, Jenny was inwardly delighted but deliberately sneered disdainfully. Johnson ignored the mockery, focusing on Kiran, waiting for his response. Kiran put down his glass, looked around the bar, and suddenly shouted, "Quiet!" The bar, which was filled with music and cheers, instantly fell silent. Everyone looked at Kiran with respect and gratitude in their eyes. Kiran said, "The host of today's treat, Mr. Johnson Barr, says he doesn't want to treat everyone anymore, so I'm sorry, but no more drinks." After a brief silence, the crowd erupted in displeasure. "Boo! Not a real man. Cheapskate!" Johnson was frustrated. He had spent so much to treat them, and they hadn't cared or thanked him. Now, with one refusal, they were all cursing him. It was infuriating. He dared not speak out and could only smile apologetically, hoping they would stop drinking. "I'd love to treat everyone, but now Mr. Barr won't pay, so I hope you'll understand." "Sorry," Kiran said again. "Mr. York, you don't need to apologize. We know it's Johnson who's stingy." "Who's Johnson? Let's see this stingy man. Let's all know this man so that he won't find any women in Dragon City." Kiran's words once again incited the crowd. Johnson felt like his chest was stuffed with cotton, making it hard to breathe. He had meant well by treating them, and now he was being turned into the enemy. It was unbearable. "He's the one who won't pay for your drinks," Jenny maliciously pointed at Johnson. A drunk man next to Johnson suddenly swung his bottle and smashed it on Johnson's head. "Ah!" Johnson screamed in pain, staggering and holding onto the table to avoid falling. Blood and wine mixed and flowed down his head. Johnson was livid. Treating them hadn't earned any gratitude. Refusing to continue had gotten him beaten. It was inhumane. "Beat this stingy man," the drunk shouted. "Beat this stingy man!" The crowd's anger was ignited, and they rushed towards Johnson. Seeing this, Johnson was terrified, fearing for his life, and ran towards the door despite the pain. At the door, just as it opened, a group of people entered. Johnson, unable to see clearly through the blood and wine, ran into them. Marcus Leo was leading the group. Curtis Barr, walking beside Marcus, saw this and thought someone was attacking Marcus. To show off, he shouted, "Protect the boss!" With that, he struck Johnson, sending him flying. "Ah!" Johnson screamed, his body thrown backward. Even in MMEDR, he was still shocked and confused. Wasn't that his father shouting? Why did he hit him? Unable to understand why his father attacked him, Johnson landed heavily. Kiran, seeing Marcus and the others enter, and Curtis hitting Johnson, couldn't help but laugh. His laughter drew Marcus's and the others' attention. Seeing Kiran, Marcus's face darkened as he walked over. Curtis, thinking he had done well, quickly followed. Before Marcus could speak, Curtis asked accusingly, "Kiran, why did you kill Luke Zax?" Jenny was about to explain for Kiran, but he lightly tapped her, preventing her from speaking. Kiran spread his hands and said, "Mr. Barr, I've been here drinking. When did I kill Luke Zax?" "You've been drinking here the whole time?" Curtis asked, not believing him. "Your son hosted the treat. Ask him." "My son? Where is he?" Curtis asked hurriedly. Kiran pointed to the unconscious Johnson on the ground. Seeing that he had hit his own son, Curtis was stunned. "Dad." Johnson, waking up, weakly called out. Boom! Curtis felt like he had been struck by lightning. Was it really his son? He stood there, frozen, staring at his son. Kiran smiled. "Curtis Barr, your son can testify. I've been here drinking and didn't kill Luke Zax." "Kiran, are you playing me?" Curtis, seeing his son's miserable state, guessed it was Kiran's doing and shouted in anger. Smack! Kiran suddenly stood up and slapped Curtis. "Playing you? Are you worthy?" Curtis was stunned by the slap. Chapter 978. Ah! Curtis Barr snapped out of his shock and shouted angrily, "Kiran York, how dare you hit me?" Smack! Kiran slapped him again. "So what if I hit you?" Curtis spat out a mouthful of blood, staring at Kiran in disbelief. He couldn't fathom that Kiran dared to hit him like this, so domineering and ruthless. He quickly looked to Marcus Leo. "Boss Leo, Kiran is too arrogant." Marcus's face was also dark, but he remained calm. He looked at Lilian Yanes and asked, "Sect leader Yanes, were you all drinking here?" "Who the hell are you to doubt our young Master York?" A drunk man nearby, who had long been fed up with Curtis, grunted angrily at Marcus's question. Marcus was embarrassed, his face turning very unpleasant. "Young Master York invited us for drinks." "We can all vouch for it," the drunk man said. "Yes, we can all vouch for it," others echoed. Lying on the ground, Johnson Barr felt both physical and emotional pain. He had treated everyone, but no one thanked him. Instead, he was beaten for not continuing the treat. Meanwhile, Kiran, who didn't spend a penny, was the one everyone was grateful to. It was utterly unfair. Anger surged within him as he struggled to get up, shouting, "It was I who treated, not Kiran York." "Yes, Mr. Barr did treat us," Kiran affirmed with a smile, then turned to Lilian and said, "Let's go." Lilian stood up without a word, following Kiran. Kiran casually wrapped his arm around Jenny Leo and looked at the angry and conflicted Marcus, saying, "Your granddaughter is coming with me." Marcus's expression shifted several times before he held back and didn't stop them. Everyone had confirmed that Kiran was drinking here, and with both Jenny and Johnson present, he couldn't be sure if Kiran had killed Luke Zax. He dared not rashly offend Kiran. "Boss Leo," Curtis shouted in humiliation and anger. Marcus waved his hand, signaling him to stop talking. Curtis stomped his foot in frustration but held back. Kiran, Lilian, and Jenny left the Nightfall bar. The three of them got into the car but didn't leave immediately. Instead, they sat inside, watching the bar. Inside the bar, after a moment of contemplation, Marcus said, "Let's go." He turned and led his men out. Curtis went to help his son, but the bar owner rushed over with the bill and said, "The total is 90 million. After a discount, it's 88 million. "How much?" Curtis and Johnson both exclaimed in shock. "Nearly 100 million. After the discount, it's 88 million, the bar owner repeated. Johnson felt drained, his vision darkening as he fainted again. Curtis wanted to refuse, but saw Marcus pause and quickly said, "I'll pay." He took out his bank card, handed it to the bar owner, and said with a heavy heart, "The password is 68S. The bar owner took the card, processed the payment, and returned with the card, respectfully saying, "You're always welcome." "Screw you!" Johnson, having just woken up, heard this and cursed in anger, spitting out another mouthful of blood. His heart felt shattered. He had spent so much money, got beaten, and was now considered the bad guy. Father and son left the bar with grim expressions, finding the outside empty as Marcus and his men had already left. Curtis thought for a moment, his face darkening as he told Johnson, "Let's go home." Johnson nodded. "Dad, we must kill Kiran York." Curtis didn't respond but was internally resolute. He would seize the position of Dragon Gate boss and kill Kiran. Father and son drove off. Kiran followed them in his car. "Why are you following them?" Jenny asked, puzzled by Kiran's ongoing enmity with the Barrs. Kiran glanced at Jenny without speaking, shaking his head as if everything was clear without words. Jenny, not understanding, continued angrily, "Answer me. Why are you following them?" "Where does all the food you eat go?" Kiran asked seriously. "What do you mean?" Jenny was confused. "You have no brains. And no." Kiran left his sentence unfinished, just shaking his head. "No what?" Jenny still didn't get it. "Enough." Lilian couldn't stand it and scolded Kiran. Jenny finally understood. "Kiran, you pervert." "I. Do you want to be punished?" Kiran asked domineeringly. Jenny shivered at the thought of being paralyzed by pressure points, but soon she angrily said, "Kiran, you bastard! If you don't explain, I'll never let you off today." In her fury, Jenny reached from the back to grab Kiran's driving hand. Smack! Lilian caught Jenny's hand and said, "Stop it. We have important things to do." Jenny's face turned sour, but she held back. Kiran stepped on the gas, accelerating after Curtis and Johnson. 20 minutes later, the Barrs entered the Yuan Mountain Villa community. Kiran, Lilian, and Jenny got out of the car and followed them. Kiran worried the security might stop them, but seeing how respectfully they treated Jenny, he guessed they knew her. Smiling, he asked, "Do you have a villa here?" "Of course," Jenny said proudly. Kiran turned to Lilian. "Great, we have a place to stay." "In your dreams. I'm not letting you, a pervert, stay in my villa," Jenny loudly objected. "You don't compare to Sister Lilian. If I were interested in you, how low would my standards have to be?" Kiran retorted bluntly. Jenny, who had been proud and smug, felt like her lungs would explode. Was she really so bad in Kiran's eyes? She was a beauty too, wasn't she? Kiran glanced at her and scoffed. Sister Lilian is a recognized fairy. "Kiran, you bastard! I'll fight you!" Jenny, unable to bear the teasing, angrily lunged at Kiran. Kiran casually tapped her, paralyzing her instantly. "How about I give you to Johnson Barr, would you agree?" Kiran asked with a smile. Jenny's heart jumped to her throat, like a lamb to the slaughter. She looked up and realized they were at the Barr family's villa. "Sister Lilian, keep an eye on this lunatic." "I'm going in to take a look," Kiran said, heading towards the Barr villa. Chapter 979. Inside the Barr family villa. "Dad, what do we do?" Johnson Barr asked in humiliation and anger. Curtis Barr's face was also filled with anger. His fists clenched and unclenched repeatedly. Spending money and getting beaten was something no one could accept. The fact that Marcus Leo ignored everything, pretending not to see, made Curtis feel even more worthless and humiliated. "Now you see how terrifying Kiran York is?" At this moment, Horace Moor's voice sounded. "Horace Moor!" Johnson exclaimed in surprise and fear. "Shut up! That's Master Moor, show some respect," Curtis scolded Johnson. "Haha, it's okay. The young don't know any better, no need to blame him," Horace responded magnanimously. Johnson, realizing this was an acquaintance of his father's and recalling Horace's great strength, quickly said, "Hello, Master Moor!" "My apologies for my earlier rudeness." Curtis, pleased with Johnson's behavior, nodded slightly, indicating forgiveness. Horace waved his hand dismissively. "We are all friends and partners. It's fine." His words suddenly stopped, his eyes sharply turning towards the door, showing both vigilance and anger. "What is it?" Johnson asked. Curtis also tensed, fists clenched. "Kiran York is here," Horace said, relaxing slightly as he realized the father and son had not betrayed him. Curtis moved closer to Horace. "I'm here." Kiran's calm voice sounded from the door as he walked in. "Kiran, what are you doing in our home?" Johnson growled, clenching his teeth. Kiran ignored Johnson and looked at Curtis. "Looks like I was right about you." "Today at the bar you were just provoking me, weren't you?" Curtis asked angrily. "That's right. At least you're not entirely stupid." Kiran nodded with a smile, then looked at Horace. "You approached Curtis to find the dragon vein, didn't you?" Horace snorted coldly, staring at Kiran. "You're relentless." "I won't stop until I kill you," Kiran said to Horace, then turned to Curtis and Johnson. "I killed Horace's son and grandson." "What?" The two looked at Horace for confirmation, shocked that someone as powerful as Horace had family members killed by Kiran. "Kiran, I will avenge them." Horace's eyes were sharp, his body radiating a strong killing intent. "I didn't mention this to intimidate you," Kiran said, shaking his head. "No need for your words," Horace shouted, releasing an even stronger aura. You're afraid I'll tell Curtis and Johnson that being with you means they'll be used as energy storage for dragon saliva and then killed, right? Kiran taunted. Nonsense, Horace roared, launching an attack at Kiran. Kiran met his attack effortlessly. Boom. The sound of thunder echoed as the villa shook, items inside shattering. Both Kiran and Horace stepped back, neither gaining an advantage. Johnson was blown back like a leaf in the wind, crashing into the wall. Curtis stepped back 5 or 6 steps, clutching his chest to avoid vomiting blood. Curtis was shocked and stunned, seeing Kiran's power for the first time. Come again! Kiran charged at Horace. Do you think I fear you? Horace shouted, swinging his fist at Kiran. Kiran suddenly changed direction, rushing towards Johnson. Kiran, leave Johnson alone! Horace shouted, striking at Kiran. Kiran smirked, raising his hand. A condensed air needle pierced Johnson's body and disappeared. Johnson trembled but showed no immediate signs of change. Kiran countered Horace's attack. Boom! Another thunderous sound echoed, both men stepping back again. Kiran ended up near Curtis. Curtis instinctively tried to run. Kiran raised his hand and attacked Curtis, just as he had with Johnson. Curtis felt a moment of discomfort, and then it passed. Kiran, I'll kill you! Horace, seeing Kiran simultaneously fight him and attack Curtis and Johnson, was enraged and attacked furiously. Kiran fearlessly retaliated. They fought fiercely in the Barr villa, shaking the building as if it were being demolished. Boom! The clash of their inner force echoed like an explosion, sending the villa's pieces flying. Let's go! Horace shouted, spitting blood but dragging Johnson and Curtis away. Don't leave! Kiran shouted, pretending to chase but clutching his chest, his face pale as if injured. Horace seized the moment, escaping with Curtis and Johnson. Kiran watched them flee, then relaxed, his face recovering its color, showing no signs of injury. He had been pretending. He calmly walked back. Lilian had already released Jenny from her pressure points. Seeing Kiran return, Jenny angrily said, Why didn't they kill you? Kiran chuckled. Wishing for my death isn't that easy. Die! Just dead-eye! Jenny cursed angrily. Lilian, exasperated by Jenny's tantrum, asked Kiran, Can we sleep peacefully now? Kiran nodded. Understanding the love spell that connected them, he felt it saved them from explanations. Kiran had no intention of killing Curtis and Johnson. He let them and Horace go on purpose. He wanted to use Horace to find the traitors in Imperial Dragon and eliminate them. As for Curtis and Johnson, Kiran had implanted dragon saliva's power in them. If they tried to use it, they would suffer. Now, Horace would pray not to absorb it, hoping to live a few more days. Otherwise, Johnson and Curtis would die and Horace would be injured. Kiran smiled calmly at Jenny. Where is your villa? Chapter 980. My home? No way am I letting you stay here. Stop dreaming, Jenny Leo said angrily. She then grabbed Lilian Yanes's arm and said, I'm letting Lilian stay at my place, but not Kiran York. Lilian didn't say anything, just smiled and followed her. Kiran had a calm smile on his face. He found Jenny quite interesting, her temper reminding him of Snow Xander. Despite her words, Jenny knew she couldn't stop them, and the three of them went to the villa anyway. Kiran saw that the villa was beautifully decorated, like a bridal chamber with a feminine touch. He joked, It looks like you prepared this house to get married and become a secluded, resentful woman. That's why you have such a bad temper, right? Exactly. I want to get married now. Why don't you marry me? Jenny retorted with a cold smile. You're too ugly, Kiran said, pretending to be mean and honest. Jenny's chest heaved in anger. You bastard, Stop it! At that moment, the villa door opened, and Marcus Leo and Bradley Leo walked in. Grandpa, Dad, why are you here? Jenny asked curiously. This doesn't concern you, go to your room, Bradley said to Jenny. Jenny felt humiliated and angry. Why? I am. Marcus raised his hand to stop her. I have important matters to discuss with young Master York and sect leader Giannis. Why are you talking to this rogue and scoundrel? Jenny glared at Kiran, unwilling to leave. Kiran felt frustrated. It wasn't his idea to come inside. Go to your room, Bradley said sternly. Jenny stomped her foot in frustration and went to her room, planning to take a bath and get back at Kiran later. The four of them remained. Please, let's move to the study, Bradley invited Kiran and Lilian. The four of them went to the study and sat down. Marcus looked at Kiran with a serious expression and said, Young Master York, thank you for helping Imperial Dragon protect the Dragon Vein. As a member of the Imperial Dragon, I am very grateful. Kiran noticed Marcus's conflicted expression and knew something was up. Just get to the point. The Dragon Vein of Dragon's Mount is lost, Marcus said, his voice filled with complexity and frustration. Lost? Lilian asked in surprise. Yes, it's lost. Marcus nodded firmly, his eyes serious. When did it disappear? Lilian asked again. About 12 years ago, it suddenly vanished. I reported it to Imperial Dragon headquarters, but no one responded. It's been an unresolved mystery ever since, Marcus said with a helpless expression. Lilian frowned. This was clearly a top-secret matter, otherwise Foxgate would have known. Did anyone come by? Kiran asked, seeing that Marcus wasn't lying. Marcus shook his head. I had Luke Zax guarded for over 20 years. Initially, I suspected him, but seeing that his strength didn't increase and he was killed today, I knew it wasn't him. The dragon vein recognizes its master, which requires a special fate. Not everyone has the opportunity, Lilian reminded Kiran. Other than Kiran being able to absorb the dragon vein's dragon saliva power, Lilian hadn't heard of anyone else being able to. In fact, even she couldn't do it without Kiran's help. Horace had specifically trained in withered wood techniques to absorb the dragon saliva power, which took a lot of effort. The mysterious disappearance of the dragon vein from Dragon's Mount was indeed perplexing. Kiran pondered for a moment and then said to Marcus, I visited Dragon's Mount today. I don't think the dragon vein is lost. Not lost? Marcus and Bradley asked simultaneously, their faces filled with hopeful surprise. Kiran nodded slightly. No, if it were lost, the aura of Dragon's Mount and the vegetation wouldn't be thriving as they are. Then where could it be? The two asked, puzzled. Kiran also looked thoughtful and shook his head. I don't know, but the dragon vein's power still nourishes Dragon's Mount. We need to find where it went. That would be great, Marcus sighed in relief, a smile appearing on his face. I drove away Horace Moor just now. If I'm not mistaken, he has taken Curtis Barr and Johnson Barr to Dragon's Mount to search for the dragon vein, Kiran said. To think Curtis is a traitor. Luckily, I thought it through and deduced that he killed Luke Zax and absorbed his inner power, Marcus snarled. I almost misunderstood you. It's good that you remained calm, Kiran praised. I'm sorry for wrongly accusing you, Marcus apologized. Kiran shook his head. We can discuss the dragon vein tomorrow. For now, let's rest. All right. I'll see you first thing in the morning, Marcus said, standing up and leaving with Bradley. Kiran and Lilian didn't see them off but looked at each other in silence, thinking about the dragon vein. It seemed that the world with its 9 dragons was indeed different. The 9 dragons, like 9 personalities, were utterly different. Kiran was puzzled about the whereabouts of the Dragon's Mount dragon vein. You should go shower and rest, Kiran said to Lilian. Lilian stood up and left. Kiran sat in the study for a long time, unable to figure it out, and eventually gave up. He found a room on the first floor, took off his clothes, and prepared to shower. Just then, the door creaked open, and Jenny walked in wearing a red camisole nightdress. Kiran, almost naked, quickly tried to put his clothes back on. Jenny, seeing Kiran's muscular physique, couldn't help but stare, her eyes sparkling. Pervert! Kiran yelled, annoyed by Jenny's gaze. Titsk! Like you're so noble, aren't you just being looked at? Jenny retorted disdainfully. Kiran. He suddenly felt that Jenny deserved a beating. Furious, Kiran grabbed Jenny. Jenny, knowing she wasn't a match for Kiran in martial arts. She didn't resist, but she bit Kiran. Crazy dog! Kiran exclaimed in anger. If you have the guts, kill me! Jenny challenged angrily. I'll beat you first! Kiran, enraged, pushed her onto the bed, lifted her short skirt, and his hand came down on her body.